Hey, what's up, Internet? One of the questions that I get asked most as somebody that teaches guitar and bass is what's the best entry level guitar bass for the money? So today I wanted to break down what I usually recommend, at least as far as electrics go, talk about why I recommend these guitars, and then go over some of the things that I think you should know about and keep in mind when you're in the market for a new guitar. Um, just a quick note, I'm definitely not sponsored by any of the brands I'm going to mention, and I'm going to throw some links down in the description, but I am not affiliated with any websites or anything like that, so I am definitely not making any money at all off of these recommendations. These are just some of the best investments that I think you can make if you're looking to buy a high quality, affordable guitar bass. I'm going to start with basses, and there are really only two specific ones that I want to talk about. I'm going to get to those, but this is my bass here. It's an Affinity Series P bass by Squier, which is a Fender subsidiary. And this is my workhorse. I've been playing and gigging with this bass pretty much exclusively for like 15, 20 years. And this is my favorite bass in the entire world. I know that there are a whole lot of other basses out there, but really the only basses I could see myself buying that I think would compete with this, in my eyes, are like a top of the line Fender Jazz bass or the Geddy Lee Signature, which is a top of the line Fender Jazz bass. Um, you know, for what I paid for this, I've gotten like an incredible amount of value um, out of this, and I really don't plan on changing it up anytime soon. When you are thinking about basses, though, there's really three main things that you need to consider. The body shape. When we talk about basses, generally, most basses have either this P bass body, which is kind of like the standard Strat body. Um, it looks like a Strat, basically, a little bigger. Or you can get a jazz bass body. Looks very similar to this, a little bit more sleek. Um, in my younger days, I kind of preferred the P bass body. I thought it was more rock and roll. Now I really like the jazz bass body, actually. That's mainly something that's just aesthetic. Basses are heavy. The less wood that you're carrying around your neck, the better. There are also pickups. That's kind of the second big thing that you need to consider. These are split single coil P bass pickups. P bass tone wise, kind of known for really sticking to that low end sound, that boomy sound. A jazz bass pickup is going to be longer and more narrow. Jazz bass pickups can generally be thought of as sticking to like the mid high ranges. Um, Again, that's a matter of preference. But you've got tone knobs. You're going to be playing through an amp. You might have a pedal. You can get pretty much any sound you're looking for out of any bass. On this, for example, I've just got this one single coil P bass pickup, and on my tone knob, I usually just crank the treble all the way up, and that usually gives me the sound that I'm looking for. The most important by far consideration, I think, when you're looking at basses is the neck. Okay, standard P basses have a little bit wider width down at the nut, whereas jazz basses have a little bit thinner width at the nut. Now, when you get to the 12th fret, they're going to be the same width. So jazz basses are a little bit more tapered and narrow down on the low end. I really, really prefer that. This model of the Affinity Series by Squier actually came with a P bass body, P bass pickup, and a jazz bass neck. I have played a lot of P bass necks, and I do not like them. They are not comfortable at all, in my opinion. Um, if you're playing something, it depends on the kind of music you're playing, really. If you're playing something where you need a little bit of speed in the bass, for my money, the jazz bass necks are just a lot more comfortable. Um, if you want to compare go to a music store, sit down with a P bass neck, sit down with a jazz bass neck, see which one you prefer. I really think the jazz bass necks are much, much more comfortable. Hate P bass necks. As far as what my top bass picks are that I usually recommend to students, there are two of them. They are both Squiers, which is the Fender subsidiary. They are both the Affinity series, which is basically what this is. The two models that they have right now, there is the Affinity series Jazz Bass, and then there is the Affinity series Precision Bass, and they call it the PJ Bass. Now, on the Jazz Bass, that's what you get. You have a Jazz Bass body, you have, I think, two Jazz Bass pickups, and you have a Jazz Bass neck. If I was going to replace this with a similarly priced bass today, that's absolutely what I would get. I'd get the Squier Affinity Series Jazz Bass. You can also get the Affinity Series Precision Bass. Now, the Precision Bass is going to have a P bass body, it's going to have a P bass neck, and it's going to have one split coil single pickup, like the P bass pickup. It's also, though, going to have a jazz bass pickup down by the bridge. It's going to have two tone knobs and a volume knob, so you can really dial in your tone. But it's still got the P bass neck, which for me is a no-no. I'd go with the jazz bass neck. If you prefer a P bass neck, obviously go with that. I will say, these all have bolt-on necks, so the necks are removable and you can replace them. If you really want a P bass body and a jazz bass neck, you could buy them both and switch the necks out. Not sure that's worth the hassle. Decide which kind of neck you want, and then if you're looking for a quality, affordable guitar, I would get one of those depending on which neck you prefer. So right now, I did some digging on Amazon and on the Fender website. Either of those basses new right now is going to cost you $279, which, believe me, I know that that's pricey, but like I said, I've been playing this bass for almost 20 years. I've made a lot more than that gigging with it, and even if I hadn't, I've been extremely happy with the return on the investment. Like, I literally could not be happier with this bass. Those models are as close as you can get to this, as far as I know. So, this is a bass, if you get one of these, you're not going to have to upgrade anytime soon, which is awesome. If you're just starting out, you can learn on it. If you start playing out, you can use it for that too, and it can really be a workhorse. I have not replaced a single thing. I take that back. I replaced the pick guard because it cracked and I had to order a new pick guard. That's when I found out that I didn't make these models anymore, because I had to get the closest one I could and make it work. I've had a couple problems. I've had to do some soldering in the volume and tone pots, but I mean, we're talking same pickups, same neck, same everything, really. Highly, highly recommend those two models of basses. As far as guitars go, I would get something like this. I bought this used. It says that is a Squier Bullet Strat. From what I've seen on Fender's website, there are two guitars that I would recommend, entry-level Squiers. The first one is the Squier Affinity Series Strat. That's basically the guitar model of the basses that I recommend. Okay, that Strat is going to come in at $229. They also make the Fender Squier Bullet Strat, so it's not Affinity Series. It is a Squier, similar quality. It comes in at $179. So there are two big differences that I can see online from looking at those. The first one is that the bullet is a hardtail. So basically, the back of the bullet is going to look like this, okay? Whereas the back of the Strat is going to look like this. So on the bullet, you will put the strings through the bridge here. And on the Strat, on the Affinity Series Strat, you'll put the strings through here. Now this is a bullet. I couldn't find a bullet exactly like this, so maybe this is a discontinued model also. The second biggest difference that I saw between those two models is that the Affinity Series has 3 single coil pickups. The Affinity Series has 3 single coil pickups, just like this, whereas the bullet on the Fender website in the Squiers section has 2 single coil pickups and then a humbucker down at the bridge. Humbucker, they just connect 2 single coil pickups basically. It's supposed to help negate any buzzing or hum when you're plugged in. If I was going to pick between the two of those, I would go for the Affinity Series Strat. It's a little bit more expensive, but on the bullet, since it is a hardtail, you're not going to be able to have like a whammy bar. I never use a whammy bar, but nice to have the option. And just because it's the Affinity Series, I think maybe it's a little bit higher quality, but $179 is not a bad price at all for a guitar that is probably gonna last you a long time and is gonna be a quality that you can go gig out with and feel fine about it. There's one other thing that I wanted to talk about, and that is the Squier Mini Hardtail. I do not recommend these for what it's worth. And I say that because I obviously, like, I've got one. Not for me. We've got a child. But this new is $175. Okay, if you buy it straight from Fender. I bought this one used for $125. If you've got the money and you have, a 5 or 6 year old that really wants to get in a guitar, it may be worth the price, but they're going to outgrow it and you could always resell it. It just kind of depends. I mean, you're going to pay the same price for one of the new bullets as you would for this. Bullet's going to be full size. Up to you. I will say this one is probably the highest quality short scale guitar that I've come across. I've seen a few of them. I've set up a few of them. I find them difficult to get set up where they will stay in tune. The intonation's a little bit off on this one. I don't know if that's just the ones that I've come across have been not the best, or if that is a feature of these short scale guitars. I did have a short scale bass when I was a kid, and that thing was awesome. So I'm not sure. Mainly, this is just a lot of money to invest in something that at best will be used 3-4 years before they move on to a full size. Really kind of depends on the situation. So there are a couple things that I wanted to talk about in addition to those picks. There are absolutely other brands out there. Epiphone's probably great. I'm just only familiar with Squiers, and I've had a lot of really good experiences with them, so that's what I tend to recommend. Epiphone's probably pretty similar quality. Another thing, buying used is absolutely fine. I've bought a whole lot of used guitars. When buying used, the two main things to watch out for are one, the electronics. So plug it in and make sure everything works. If there's a little static when you move the knobs, the volume knob and the tone knobs, that's probably something that's an easy fix. You need to put a little electronic cleaner in there, which somebody can do during a setup. And two, if possible, make sure that the truss rod adjustment isn't stripped out, because that's probably going to be more of an expensive fix. So the truss rod is a bar that runs, like it's a metal bar that runs through the neck of your guitar. Usually on the electrics that I've come across, you adjust it right here. When I bought this guitar, and there was a bass that I bought like this too, so you're supposed to be able to loosen the strings and stick an Allen wrench down in there and give it little quarter turns to adjust the neck. Well, on this guitar, I get a lot of fretting out down in this higher register here, and I can't fix it because I can't adjust the truss rod with an Allen wrench because it's stripped. So try not to buy a guitar where that is the case. There are a couple ways to fix that. Neither of them are easy. Neither of them are cheap. So that's my biggest concern when buying used. Make sure that that's all right, and make sure that the electronics work. What else? Whether you buy new or used, have it professionally set up. So take it to a local music store. That's probably going to cost somewhere between $30 and $50 plus a pack of strings, but I really do think it's worth it. If you're buying it from a music store, there's a pretty good chance that it's already set up pretty well, but that's definitely not a guarantee. If you're buying new online or used from somewhere else, definitely get it set up. And when you take it to a music store or a luthier and have it set up, they're going to make a number of micro adjustments to your instrument that are going to make the guitar much easier and much more comfortable to play. So they're going to make sure that the neck is set up correctly. They're going to make sure that the string height is set up correctly and the strings are, where they should be in relation to the neck. And they're going to make sure that the intonation is set up correctly, and that they'll make micro adjustments to make sure that the strings are set up this way correctly, by doing stuff down at the bridge. They should clean and condition your fretboard probably, and clean the electronics if that needs to be done. In some cases they will file your frets down, but that's usually kind of an extreme thing. Relatively simple, but and if you're buying one of the picks that I recommend, that's probably not going to be an issue. But getting it set up is going to make your guitar much easier to play, much more comfortable to play. And it's going to make learning and playing a much more comfortable, rewarding experience for sure. Another thing that I'm going to recommend: buy a hard case and not a gig bag. I will leave a link to a couple hard cases in the description, but that right here is from not being in a hard case and being in a gig bag, and it was being transported carefully, mind you, and got rocked against something in the vehicle. Kind of a bummer. So buy a hard case. You're making this investment. A hard case, maybe you're paying like $80. Relatively small investment to protect a relatively large investment. There are going to be other accessories that you're going to need: cables, straps, guitar picks, maybe a stand. All that's going to be relatively inexpensive. You can get bundles when you buy a new guitar. So like most of the links that I'm going to have and the two of the recommended picks that I have, some of them will have like a bundle option for like $100 more. I don't generally recommend getting those. They rarely come with a hard case. They come with a soft case or a gig bag. The strap isn't usually very high quality. Neither is the amplifier if they come with one. My personal opinion and experience with those is that they throw in a guitar, like a quality guitar, and then a bunch of relatively cheaply made stuff, and tack on like $100. So you may be looking at some separate purchases, but I think it'll be worth it to do it like that. Besides the guitar and the case, if you go the electric route, you're also going to need an amplifier at some point. That's going to be another fairly considerable expense, but you can definitely get an inexpensive one until you're ready to start gicking, which will probably be a while. I may do an amp buying guide in the future, but there are some great deals out there. For example, I was at a local music store. They had this in the used section. It's a Line 6 Spider. We were looking for an amp and guitar for our son, and basically, Line 6. Say what you want about the brand. We got this used for $20, which I thought was an incredible steal. A great amp. Maybe I'll talk more about it if I do an amp buying guide in the future. They don't make that model anymore. Kind of a theme with my equipment now, I guess. But there are deals out there in terms of buying amps and finding quality used merchandise, guitars, whatever. The long and short of it is, though, that you're going to have to throw down a few $100, but if you do it right, it is an investment that will last you a really long time and that you'll definitely get your money's worth out of. So I do hope that this was helpful. If you're thinking about buying a guitar for you or somebody else, or maybe you've already got one, check out some of my theory lessons. I will link to in the description, or maybe they're on your screen right now. Peace.